So I'm about to walk you through a discovery that I recently made regarding the guitar, its fretboard, and how every chord in existence really just boils down to one fundamental chord shape. And I know this sounds kind of impossible, but don't worry, you're not going to have to know a bunch of music theory or be a great guitar player to understand everything. I'm going to try to keep it very straightforward, practical, and hopefully it'll be very enlightening for you on your guitar journey. And it's something that I haven't really seen anybody else talk about, despite the fact that it's been one of the biggest breakthroughs that I've personally had in my past 10 years as a student of the instrument. And so I feel that it's kind of my duty to share my findings with you. So about a week ago, I was taking a walk, asking myself what video idea would be novel enough to be sponsored by Donner Music and their legendary Hush C travel guitar. More on that later. And I asked myself a simple question. Why are chord shapes the way they are? For example, a C major chord. Why is it this specific pattern of fingers on, strings 5, 4, and 1 on these unique frets that makes the C major chord? Why isn't it a different shape like this or like this? And so some of you may know that a C major chord is really just a harmony of 3 unique notes, and that is a C note, an E, and a G. And of course our shape has some octaves in there, so we have like 2 C's and 2 E's. If you didn't already know this, then I think you'd really benefit from, before going any deeper into this video, looking at my free training titled Secrets of the Fretboard, and it should be linked below in the description. Now, once you've done that and you have this understanding that a C major chord is really just these 3 notes harmonized together, then it becomes a logical conclusion that this shape merely comes about as the most efficient way to play all C's, E's, and G's in an open position on the guitar fretboard. And yet still we can ask, why is it that this shape is, the most efficient way to play those specific notes and not some other shape? And that just comes down to the tuning, right? Look at, for example, a D major chord. In standard tuning, our shape to play D, F sharp, and A's, or a D major chord, looks like this. But if we were to tune all of our strings to D, A, D, F sharp, A, D, then we can just strum all the strings open, and that would be our D major chord shape. So it all just depends on the tuning. And that makes sense, right? So now comes the question, what's the deal with standard tuning? Like, why out of all possible combinations of notes did we choose E, A, D, G, B, and another E to be our standard? It certainly isn't the nicest sounding tuning. Well, this is where my discovery comes into play. But before that, I just want to take 1 second to thank Donner Music as the sponsor of today's video for sending me this awesome guitar. It's called the Hush C because it's practically silent unless plugged into an amp like it is right now, or a pair of earphones, so you can play it anywhere, anytime, without disturbing anyone. And it's also super compact and portable, as it can be taken apart and put into this really nice slim case, perfect for traveling, and yet it still sounds and plays actually really nice. I would genuinely recommend this guitar to someone looking for just a great travel guitar or something that they can, thrash on at 3 a.m. without waking up any of the neighbors. So with that said, enough suspense. Let's dive into the magic of standard tuning and why we chose to tune our strings in this apparently random fashion. Oh, and I almost forgot, I'll link Donner Music down in the description if you want to go pick up a Hush C for yourself. Now, standard tuning is so special because when we look at the relationship between the strings, a very interesting pattern emerges. And I want to show you this by looking at first the 6th and the 5th strings. So we have an E note on our 6th string, and we have an A note on the 5th. Now an A is an interval apart from E that we call a perfect 4th. And this is just basically a fancy way of saying that it's 5 notes apart or 5 half steps away. So from E, if we were to count up the fretboard, 1 note would be an F, and then 2 notes is an F sharp, 3 is a G, 4 is G sharp, and 5 is an A. So the 5th fret of the low E string is the same note as the open A. Now let's try the same process, but now with the 5th and 4th strings. So if we go from A, 1st fret would be A sharp, 2nd is a B, 3rd is a C, 4th is C sharp, 5th is D. So once again, the 5th fret of our string is equal to the open string directly below it. Now, the same process emerges when we look at the D and G strings, as G is also a perfect 4th above D. But now, when we get to the G string, if we count it from G, so we have G, G sharp is the 1st fret, then A sharp, B is on the 4th fret this time. So these are a distance of a major third away, meaning the B string is actually tuned down a half step lower than it should be if we wanted the pattern to remain the same. However, obviously we didn't want it to remain the same, otherwise standard would have a C note as our second string. But the reason why we tune it as a B is because it just makes some things easier to play on the guitar. For now, don't worry about that too much. Just remember that it is the case that the B string kind of breaks the pattern. And then when we go to the high E, the pattern resumes as normal. If we count up C, C sharp, D, D sharp, and E, 5th fret of the B string is an E. Okay, so due to this unique pattern that exists in the way that we tune our strings in standard tuning, we are able to do something very special, which is shifting chord shapes, or shapes in general. Can be anything really, a scale, an arpeggio. We can shift them like horizontally. This way is horizontally, this is vertically, right? Up, down, this is horizontal, among string sets. So I'm going to look at a power chord example to kind of explain this for you. So if we take a G power chord, which would consist of a G note and a D note, so we can play it like this. We can move this shape, obviously, vertically up the neck to get different power chords. But because of the way the strings are tuned, we can also move this same exact shape horizontally down string sets. So what I did there is I just dropped each finger down one string, and now I have a C power chord because my root is now a C on the A string. And we're only able to do this because the distance from E to A, these two strings, is the same distance from A to D. So the shape remains the same to play a power chord. And I can repeat the process on the next pair of strings. And then the next. Hold on, that doesn't sound quite right. And that's because, if you recall from earlier, our B string is tuned a half step lower than it should be. So to account for this, anytime we hit the B string, we have to shift that note up one fret in order to kind of counterbalance the fact that it's tuned down a half step more than it should be. So now we have this as our power chord shape. And then if we go one more string set down, now we once again hit the B string, this time with our index finger, and this one has to be shifted up to get the same shape as before. So now you see how a single shape can be transferred among string sets and remain almost unchanged, except for a small alteration when we hit the B string. And this is really the power of standard tuning. And yet, most of this may have been pretty obvious to you. Like maybe you've already played some songs with some power chords or something that kind of transition between string sets. So here's where the real magic happens. And this is the bulk of, what I found is taking a full chord and applying the same process to it. So for example, a G major chord. Okay, we're going to play it like this. Now, if I repeat the process of just shifting everything down one string set, so all my fingers are going to go down one string. Now, my ring finger was on the high E string, but now it's shifted down to an imaginary string that runs right directly below my low E, so I don't really have to worry about that. And the other thing to take into account is that where my root was previously on the low E string, now it's on the A string, so I don't have to strum the low E. Okay, this, for all practical purposes, does not exist anymore since we shifted everything down. The last thing is, since I'm changing the pattern here from a G to whatever this shape is going to be, now I have to remember to change the B string as well, so that goes from open to the first fret, and I end up with this shape right here. Now, if you have come across this shape before, you'll know that it's the C major shape. And this was absolutely mind-blowing for me the first time that I discovered this, because it shows us that really a C major shape is just a G major chord shape shifted down one string set. Now, what if we were to repeat this process but starting on the C major chord? So we start with C major. Now we're going to shift each finger down one string. And then once again, we're now have a new root. It's going to be on the D string. So we're strumming from there. And we have to recall that the B string needs to be shifted up one fret. So I can just bar these two on the first fret. And that is an F major chord. And you may know that an F major chord is really an E major shaped bar chord, right? So it's actually an E major chord shape that we just found. So from G major, we've now found the chord C major and E major hidden in the exact same shape. What if we were to repeat this process from E major? So we shift every finger down a string, we shift up the B string, and now our new root is no longer E, it's on the A string. And that is an A major chord shape. And we can repeat this process a total of one more time before the cycle will repeat. So from A major, we shift every finger down a string, and then the B string up 1 fret, and we get a D major chord. Okay, so hopefully you're finding this as mind-blowing as I myself did, because this really opens up so many doors for new connections on the fretboard. Now, if we wanted to do it one more time, we'd shift these two down, our B string shifts up, and now our new root is on the G string. This is really the bottom half of a G major chord. So it's really just back to the beginning of the cycle, and we've just completed all basic major open chords on the guitar neck. We have G, C, E, A major, and D. And this is just one musical artifact, so to speak, that you can do this with. I really challenge you to do this with other types of chords. For example, try a minor chord. So maybe E minor. Now we can shift this down or even up a string set. So if we shifted it down, it would look like this. That's an A minor chord. We can shift it down again. Now we get a D minor, right? And you can repeat this process with minor chords, with seventh chords, with ninths, with sus, literally anything that you can think of. It can even be, say, an arpeggio or a scale. The limitations are basically non-existent, because we're just forging new connections between how all of these shapes relate to one another and deepening our understanding of the fretboard, and ultimately potential for expressive freedom. Now, to leave you with a very practical use for everything that we learned today, one thing that I myself have been implementing in my own playing since making this discovery is taking two shapes that are separated by a given number of string set shifts. So for example, a G major and a C major. We now know that it's just one string set shift away, right? And so I'll take an idea from one of those chords, either the G or the C, and then try applying it to the other one, just taking into account the shift that occurs. So to show you this, I really need to just give you an example. Say for the G major, sometimes I'll do this kind of melodic thing. So now, because I know that a C major is really just a G major shifted down, I can take this same melodic idea and just shift it all down one string. And now it will apply for my C major chord. And there are countless ideas that you can kind of translate back and forth between different shapes that previously seemed very disparate, but hopefully now seem a little bit more connected. For example, maybe a sus4 alteration. So what you can do is, on your C major chord, if you put your pinky down in front of your middle finger here, it creates a C sus4. It's a beautiful chord. But now, since I know a G major is really just a C major chord shifted down a string set, I can do the same thing, but now on the A string. Okay, so I really encourage you to experiment with this and take ideas that you have in different shapes and apply them to other ones using these kind of connections all over the fretboard. If you want to learn some really beautiful chords that you can start applying this idea with, then you can check out this video. Otherwise, if you want to master the guitar, then check out the first link down in the description.